Who was the real Aurangzeb? Was he great, terrible, or something else? Neeraj.
Ji, that will depend on the lens through which we look at Aurangzeb. If we look at him through the lens of an ordinary human being and try to assess him on the basis of general humanity, and the general principle for humanity is that we should not should not behave with others in a manner which we don't like to be reciprocated for us. If we look at the history of Aurangzeb in that sense, he was a terrible guy, just because of the kind of atrocities that he committed on his subjects. Now, when we talk of subjects, in the Hindu tradition, there is a definition of a king, for Raja. And there is this hoary tradition of calling the kings as Chandravanshi or Suryavanshi. The simple reason for that is that since sun is the ultimate source of energy, of vitality, of life for earth, it nourishes all the living beings. If sun does not exist, life cannot exist. Likewise, a king is considered or used to be considered a source of energy, a source of nourishment, a source of life. That is why kings were referred to as Suryavanshis, because that is the duty that they had to perform. And for them, the term was not subjects, it was praja. And praja was that the king was supposed to look upon his praja as his own offsprings. When we look at Aurangzeb in that context, we find that this monarch was absolutely terrible in most of the manners in which he conducted his rule. And in the truest sense, he cannot be even considered a Raja according to that definition. Why do we say so? Because sometimes what happens is we become biased or prejudiced against somebody. What I will try to do is, I'll try to present it in the manner in which some of those historians try to portray him, whom we are today discussing. For example, Audrey Truschke had a seminar in India where she was trying to say that Aurangzeb is a misunderstood personality. He was very complicated and he had been partially quoted, and as a result, his true picture has not been given. Now, for this, what she was doing was she was suppressing some facts regarding Aurangzeb. I'll try to share them with you. She was using a projector for that, and the content that she displayed on screen was, I'll just read it out for the convenience of our viewers. It was a farman of Aurangzeb in 1659. What it states is, several people have, out of spite and rancor, harassed the Hindu residents of Banaras and nearby places, including a group of Brahmins who are in charge of ancient temples there. Dash, dash, dash. Then there is a break. Then she projects. The king is saying, you must see that nobody unlawfully disturbs the Brahmins or other Hindus of that region, so that they might remain in their traditional place and pray for the continuance of the empire. Now, as expected, anyone who is going to read this much portion will be impressed by Aurangzeb, because somebody who has been portrayed as bigoted, as a bigoted Muslim, this does not give an impression of someone who is very bigoted. Now, the catch over here is that when we read the entire Farman, then we find out that she has omitted some portions of it. What she had omitted is, I'll read from the Farman itself. In the first year of his reign, in a charter granted to a priest of Benares, he avowed that his religion forbade him to allow the building of new temples, but did not enjoin the destruction of old temples. So in this very Farman, where Audrey Truschke deliberately created a break there it was specifically mentioned that the religion of Aurangzeb does not give permission of building any new temples. Although this is a very small portion which she omitted, but then this tells you the kind of jugglery or the kind of tricks that are being played to portray Aurangzeb as a benign ruler. If you look at the entire Farman, then after 10 years, 1669, the Farman that he issues is a blanket order to demolish each and every temple, each and every school of Hindus, which is absolutely inhuman and cannot be considered as something worthy of a king who deserves to be given the title of a great king, or any other honorific should not be given to such a person. And that is just one aspect. Apart from this, the kind of atrocities, the kind of torture that was perpetrated on his subjects just because they did not belong to his religion is it presents a very terrifying picture of this person. For example, when the 9th Sikh Guru Guru Tegh Bahadur went to Delhi, there he was accompanied by 3 Kashmiri Brahmins. Most of us are aware the barbaric manner in which they were killed publicly, and the aim was just to establish, just to convert them to Islam, so that the declared objective of converting the entire world into a Darul Islam can be created. And that is not the only blemish on him. One picture that you showed just now, in which it was being shown how Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj was being tortured and killed. If you look at that picture, you can notice that small pieces of his skin were being ripped open, and then they were thrown to the dogs which were present there. Initially, he had been blinded, and this was done publicly just to create terror among the general population. And what was the reason? The reason was same, that he should Sambhaji Maharaj should either get converted to Islam or he will be killed in the most barbaric manner imaginable. Apart from this, see, what we can do is, as I told you, that when Masiri Alamgiri was to be written, his followers were of the opinion that this monarch has been an ideal Islamic ruler. So his entire source of inspiration, the source of rule, was derived from Islamic scriptures. Therefore, if we just take a cursory look at the Islamic sources, we can find out from where Aurangzeb or that Aurangzeb mentality was originating. You also showed that picture in which jizya was being taken from a dhimmi. Now, this concept of jizya originates directly from Quran chapter number 9 verse number 29, which says that they should give jizya feeling humiliated. And that is why you notice that the Hindu who is paying jizya has a bent back. He has to bend his back in front of the commissioner who is going to collect jizya from him, and his hand position should be in the position of begging, and the tax commissioner is going to grab that from him, not going to take it gently from his hands. And this is exactly what has been in the Islamic theory, which Aurangzeb turned into Islamic practice. Then there is a justification which is given regarding this. When we talk about temple destruction, because that is right now a hot topic, there is one way of sanitizing the brutal history of Aurangzeb. For that, what is done is, it is generally stated the number of temples that were destroyed on his orders is generally reduced to show again a benign image of the monarch. And for this, Audrey Treshke has gone on to record to say that the overall number of temples that were destroyed during the rule was less than 80. She quotes Richard Eaton, who says that the number of temples that were destroyed was 15. And then, being very magnanimous and generous, Audrey Truschke increases the number by a very small amount. Still, there is a caveat. The caveat is that the destruction of temples was not due to his Islamic zeal, due to his bigotry, but it was purely a pragmatic action, because the temples were a source of politics, were a center of politics, not even a source, they were centers of politics and wealth. That is why he decided to demolish those temples. Now, nothing could be farther from truth in both these cases. Firstly, if we look at Masiri Alamgiri and the records present in this single book will give you an idea. Now, what has been done in this book is, it is written that the workers of the emperor went to some place, they destroyed temple so and so, where the temple is mentioned by a name. Then at some places it is, they went there, they destroyed many temples. Then a third kind of entry is, they went to that place, they destroyed 62 temples. So there are places where the number is specified. Then there are places where the number is not specified. Now, all those references where the number of temples destroyed is not specified, it is mentioned many. If we consider that to be just one temple and then calculate the number of temples destroyed during his reign, the number comes out into hundreds. And if we, now many can be a conjecture, it can be 100, it can be 1,000. So let us get that out of our controversy, let us get that out of reckoning. Still the number runs into hundreds. So, and that is one point. The second is that if it had anything to do with sheer politics, sheer pragmatism, sheer loot of wealth, then the aspect that cannot be described is that why were the idols picked up from there and then they were buried at the footsteps of the mosques. For example, I'll just give you one quotation. On 27th January 1670, what are they saying? The temple was destroyed. I'll just read it out for you. During this month of Ramzan, abounding in miracles, the emperor, as the promoter of justice and overthrower of mischief, as a knower of truth and destroyer of oppression, as the zephyr of garden of victory and the reviver of faith of the prophet, issued orders for the demolition of the temple situated in Mathura, famous as the Dera of Keshav Rai. In a short time, by the great exertions of his officers, the destruction of this strong foundation of infidelity was accomplished, and on its site, a lofty mosque was built at the expenditure of a large sum. Now, from this much portion, you can understand that the reason is not financial, because had the reason been financial, not a large sum of money should have been spent to build a lofty mosque. Then let us move forward. This temple of folly was built by that gross idiot Bir Singh Deo Bundela. Before his accession to the throne, the Emperor Jahangir was displeased with Sheikh Abul Fazl. This infidel, that means Rao Singh Bundela, this infidel became a royal favorite by slaying him, and after Jahangir's accession was rewarded for this service with permission to build the temple, which he did at an expense of 33 lakh of rupees. The idols, large and small, set with costly jewels, which had been set up in the temple, were brought to Agra and buried under the steps of the mosque of the Begum Sahib in order to be continually trodden upon. The name of Mathura was changed to Islamabad. So this single entry should give you the idea regarding the mentality that was working for destruction of temples.
Yes. Thank you, Neeraj ji.
Ji.
Abbas ji, who was the real Aurangzeb? Great, terrible, or something else?
Yeah, so hope I'm audible because I connected from phone now. So I hope that the audio is clear right now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, yeah. So as far as Aurangzeb is concerned and the truth about him is concerned, it is actually very much black and white. Unlike other Timurid Padshahs, when it comes to Akbar or someone else, it's absolutely black and white. And uh, and if we analyze the character of any king, like how we do for any other king, it needs to be read from the time of his struggle to the throne in the age of youth to the period when he becomes a king and how he treats his subjects, and so on and on. So while the youth of Aurangzeb smells of gore, the blood through the stories of the betrayals and religious bigoted fanaticism embedded as glorious tales in contemporary biographies, it also comes out from the secondary sources also the secondary sources really echoed exactly the same emotion which come from the primary sources. When I talk about the secondary sources, it is I can consider Jadunath Sarkar works to be the secondary sources. Now, there were two primary characters of this king, whom few people allege or tell to be the great one. One is that one character was the betrayal, other was the religious bigotry of the Sufi Alamgir. And in fact, I have to say that till the time the pious earth of Bharat Ma was put on him in Kuldabad, Aurangabad in 780, he was continuing to do this business. Though, and if I just go to the phase when he was dying and when he was on his deathbed, in 1707 AD, he says to his son Azam that I came alone and I go as a stranger. I do not know who I am nor what I have been doing. So many people would say that perhaps it has no connection, no connotation or something, but perhaps as per the American historian Stanley Wolpert, at this moment, Aurangzeb was trying to emphasize that how actually he led to the destruction of whole of the empire by his religious fanaticism and lot more. This is the analysis of the Stanley Wolpert, and she has put it out a great amount of detail in her book, The New History of India. Now, if I go back to the age of his youth, in 1658 to start off with, which can be spoken of as the first phase of his betrayal, the war of the succession for the Peacock throne, which was happening between Shah Jahan and the four sons. Dara Shikoh was defeated in a battle by the Aurangzeb, and that time Aurangzeb was being supported by his brother Murad. Now, Dara Shikoh had taken the refuge in Dara Shikoh had left and had taken refuge somewhere else, and the Murad and Aurangzeb were supposed to march into Delhi. But later on, we get the tale that Aurangzeb actually arrested Murad by calling him to a night supper, and so that even Murad, who actually helped him, could be thrown out of the way. So right now, I'm not even talking about the religious bigotry or something. I'm just emphasizing on one of the character, that is betrayal. Yeah. So now, on the other hand, people may say that perhaps this was a very common trait among all other kings, which can be seen in the earlier kings of India too, whether it's Ashok or anyone else for that matter. But Aurangzeb's case was not only about the betrayal, but it had a lot to do with the religious bigotry. Because when it comes to the case of the Dara Shikoh, when he was brought in by being captured, when he was actually there was a Afghan emir or someone who had betrayed Dara Shikoh again, and he was sent back to Aurangzeb. And then Aurangzeb had declared him to be an apostate, and he was supposed to be, as per the Islamic theology, of course, the death penalty was something which had to come on him. So came the night of August 30, 1659 AD. Dara was assassinated mercilessly, and in fact, it was done in front of his own son, Sifir, and he was actually when he killed him, he was beheaded, and his head was further trisected into parts, and it was carried to Shah Jahan to show that, this is what I have done to him. So the message was that King Aurangzeb, your son, sends this plate to let him, that is Shah Jahan, see that he does not forget him. So when the plate came to Shah Jahan, he felt very delighted at once that, my son is right now perhaps getting back to the right path, and he has understood the mistakes and the things. But the moment the box was opened up, it was the trisected pieces of the Dara Shikoh's head. So, in fact, according to Abraham Merli, in the book Last Spring, The Life and the Times of the Great Mughals, Aurangzeb has in fact justified it as a necessity. He says, Aurangzeb is being quoted here, where he says that Dara absurd all power, girt his lions to promote Hinduism and destroy Islam, and act as a king, set you, that is Shah Jahan, aside. If God forbid, the aim of the infidel has succeeded, it would have been hard for us to answer him, that is God, and on the last day of judgment. So he was very much clear that it was indeed the religious fanaticism, or whatever name we might like to call it, which really made him kill the Dara Shikoh that way. And same happened with Sambhaji too. He also was beheaded, and like how the Dara Shikoh's head was also left for the public exhibition for a lot of days. Same happened with Sambhaji Maharaj too. And in fact, as Neeraj was already explaining, that Islamic world often recognizes the Aurangzeb as Alamgir Zinda Pir. Actually, he's always seen as a very role model, a role king, and he indeed was a Sufi by the practice and many other things. And of course, so why not? Because he followed the Hanafi school, which interestingly is considered to be one of the most liberal Islamic school. And again, the acts of Aurangzeb and his fatwas define best that what the Hanafi school too stands for. Because Fatwa Alamgiri, which is one of the most magnum opus work from which comes out from Aurangzeb, speaks of a lot of things, and it is based on the Hanafi school. So it also directs us to that where the thought is coming from. Now, people also celebrate Aurangzeb because he is known to have memorized Quran very well. And in fact, he replicated many copies of Quran in his own hand through calligraphy and whatnot. So, and the dictates of Islam as understood by Aurangzeb in accordance to the Hanafi school were completely followed. Right from the beginning of his reign, he had put Mutasawwis who were appointed to forbid the practice of music, dance, and many other things. So it just dried away from the Timurid court, which somehow was coming in practice in the time of Akbar and so on and on. But it was a hardcore Islamic practice which was bestowed upon the court of the Timurid Empire. Now, it was in the 12th year of his reign when he brought the prohibition of the golden garments, right? And in the 21st year, he even brought that what would be the length of trousers which is to be worn, trouser, tunic, or whatever we may like to call it. So even length was prescribed. So he was setting a very right precedent that how Islamic state needs to work, right? So Aurangzeb also brought back the jizya system, which was once abolished by Akbar. So although Akbar had other means of extortion, right now we are not here to discuss Akbar, but yeah, he brought back the jizya. And the records tell us that during his reign, many Hindu merchants had actually fled away from the Deccan to escape the living of jizya, and which led to the scarcity of grain, even in the camp of Aurangzeb. And one of the general actually came complaining to Aurangzeb that, this needs to be stopped because we are going to starve and the things like that. But Aurangzeb stood firm that, this cannot change. So for him, in fact, for the political gain also, religion was something which had to come in the priority all the time. Now there's a text called Muntakab al-Lubab, written by Khafi Khan. So he mentions that once Hindus were protesting against the unjust of the tax which were put, they were protesting in Jama Masjid, and they were mercilessly trampled upon by the elephants of Aurangzeb. In fact, Masiri Alamgiri tells us that apart from jizya, an excess trade duty of around 5% was imposed over the Hindu traders. And the intent was very clear because he wanted to convert them to Islam. Often we are also made to hear the tune that Aurangzeb built more temples than he demolished. So nothing can be more far from truth than the statement. And in fact, Neeraj was very well explaining the whole phenomenon, that how the whitewashing happens, or whatever washing we want to call it. And so he explained it very well. But this Hanafi Sufi Aurangzeb Banaras Farman, which in fact Neeraj also spoke about the first one, that the existing temple is not to be demolished, but the new ones not to be coming. So this is what Audrey Ruske has quoted very selectively. And many other historians also say that, because also it was the first year, so he was looking to build upon a lot of things, and his fanaticism grew more and more with the days to come. In fact, Sir Jadunath Sarkar observed Aurangzeb's iconoclastic fury to be predating even to the era when he became Pasha. He tells us that during the, I'm quoting him, Viceroyalty of the Gujarat, Aurangzeb had desecrated the recently built Hindu temple of Chintamani in Ahmedabad by slaughtering a cow in it, and then turned the building into a mosque. He had at that time also demolished many other Hindu temples in the province, which are probably new constructions. So so again, Sir Sarkar goes on to explain, he has actually used extensively the edicts of Aurangzeb directly as a primary source. So according to these sources, the local officers in every town and villages in fact, the remotest of the places of Orissa and West Bengal, right from Cuttack to Mednipur, were called upon and instructed to pull down temples, even of the smallest of the clay temples, huts-like temples which are built during the last 12 years, and no old temples to be repaired. Even the repair was prohibited. Comes the 12th year of the reign of Aurangzeb. He issued the very farman where he talks that all the schools and temples of Kafirs needs to be just shut down and closed. And the Jadunath Sarkar has in fact commented, given his observation on this edict, and he writes that his destroying hand now fell upon the temples that commanded the veneration of Hindus all over India, like the Somnath temple in Gujarat, the Kashi Vishwanath temple in Banaras, the Keshav Rai temple in Mathura. So the most sacred places of the Hindus were being targeted. Of course, there was a deep intention. Then Farman, as I spoke right now, that the Farman was very clear that even the remotest of the places, the temples had to be found out and pulled down. No places were to be left over. And those who doubts that actually what has happened, that not many things appear, in fact, in the secondary sources too. But those who are really of interest in the history, they can really investigate the archives and the museums, which still have the seals of the Qazis, the attestation of the Sikhs, which accompany the reports about the destruction of the mandirs, which were sent to the emperor, that the complete detailed reports which were given. And now there's also an opinion that, or maybe people think that perhaps Aurangzeb was going a bit mellow down as he was turning older, but that's not the case at all. And as per again, Dr. Sir Sarkar has shown the primary sources, which show that during the last decade of his reign, he's asking, he's inquiring whether the Hindu worship, which he had put down in Somnath early in the reign, had been revived through the slackness of the local governor or not. And with the same purpose and intent, Aurangzeb in his letter to the governor ordered through a thorough inquiry, and he instructed, and I quote, if the idolaters have again taken to the worship of the images at the place, and then destroy the temple in such a way that no trace of building may be left, and also expel them, that is the worshippers, from the place. So now, I think Neeraj also spoke about it, that how the numbers of the temples can be calculated. And in fact, I was referring to the work of the great Dr. Conrad Elst, in which he has given the way also. He's mentioned that Hassan Ali Khan says that 172 temples have been destroyed in an area. Then 63 in the other. Then Abu Tarib reports that 66 temples have been destroyed. So here we add 66 plus 63 is 129 plus 172. It sums already to 400 plus. So this is the record of only 3 of them, but many more are there. Then there is a lot of the case of the destruction reported in Akbharat of Aurangzeb. which talks about the destruction post 1679. And just there are many, but if I just pick one of the exhibit, and I'm choosing an exhibit from January, February of 1680, which reads, the Grand Temple in front of Maharana's mansion at Udaipur, one of the most wonderful buildings of the age, which had caused the infidels. Much money was destroyed and images broken. Well, if the truth be told, it is impossible for a student of history to bring forth the maxed out count of the mandirs, which were destroyed, as the thousands of small temples, like the clay huts and something like that, which also came in the way. And in fact, the Muslim chroniclers didn't give a heed to record them too, because from their own what you can say, skewed theological perspective, they were not very important in the temple. So they didn't mention it, but the local folklores do talk about it. We have a lot of records about them too. And also, I do believe that a hypothesis needs to boil in, which will also talk about the destruction of tens of thousands of temples, which could actually never see the light of the day because of the Aurangzeb, because he had prohibited the construction of temples. So if that prohibition would not have been there, perhaps we would have got even more temples in the mandirs. Now, he destroyed the gurukuls too. The schools, the Brahmins and the Hindu schools were destroyed badly. And in fact, you already showed us the farmans, which speaks about the conversion and how he was inducing the people to get converted. There were ₹4 for the Hindu men and ₹2 for the Hindu women. And there is enough and more. So now we are also told that, because I often come across articles, especially in Times of India, The Wire, which says that Aurangzeb made our economies very glorious. And in fact, our produce and everything was just growing under this great Aurangzeb. He, along with Khilji, he's also considered as an economic reformer and whatnot. So without taking much of a time, if I just dwell upon what Francois Bernier talks about the period, because he was visiting the court at the period when Alamgir was living. So he says, before it, I must have an interesting point that people point out that GDP share of India, they are very fond of quoting Madison, Angus Madison. And they said that our GDP share was almost 1/4 of the world, and we rose above China. But the truth is that we were always ahead of China as per Angus Madison, and we fell drastically below China only in the period of Akbar. Second point, by 1080 or something, our GDP share was around 28% already. And when the Mughals, actually Timurids, Mughals is a corrupted word, when they came in, we already were sitting around 24.3% GDP. Now, what is to be noted is from 1500 to 1820 AD, GDP per capita is negative. GDP per capita growth is minus. It happens in no other phases, not even during the British phases. So now, why this should be so? So if I just quote Francois Bernier, he says that gold and silver are not in greater plenty here than elsewhere. He says that they are there in a plenty. On the contrary, the inhabitants have less the appearance of a money-haired people than those of many other parts of the globe. He talks about it. But further, he writes, it is a tyranny often so excessive as to deprive the peasants and the artisans of the necessaries of life and leave them to die of misery and exhaustion. It is owing to this miserable system of the government that most of the towns in Hindustan are made up of earth, mud, and other wretched material, that there is no city or town which, if it be not already ruined, deserted, does not bear evident marks of approaching decay. Laborers perish due to the bad treatment from governors. Children of poor are carried away as slaves. Peasantry abandon the country driven by the despair. As the land throughout the whole empire is considered the property of the sovereign, there can be no earldoms, marquetes, or the duchies. The royal grants consist only of pensions, either in the land of money, which the king gives, arguments, retenches, or takeaways away at the places. So the takeaway from here is that while the GDP of the Sultanate was not exorbitantly too huge as people claim, it was also very normal. Like how Mughal came, it was 24.3. During the Aurangzeb reigns also, it was 25 point something percent. So, but the GDP per capita was reducing because of many such cases, which is presented by the people who visited the court. So, at large, I can only say that he did all the wrong with a king could do. There was nothing great to add to this man self-proclaimed Alamgir or something. So I will submit my case here so far.
Thank you.